Buena gente, me pasaron este video que habla de los Blue Hybrids y aparte los pibes me comentaron que también nombran a Seba dentro del video. Así que nada, pensé en, entre comillas, reaccionarlo o traducir también para los que les da paja verlo subtitulado y dar una opinión de este lado del charco sobre el video, a ver qué les parece.
Some decks never die. I can think of a few greats, the lists reserved for true connoisseurs of the game. Lilith Loop, Machine Dramon, D-Brigade, and Beelstar, among others. Surviving in a game like the Digimon Tcg can be a challenge, especially these days when decks from just one set back can feel hopelessly outclassed by the new kids on the block. But with good fundamentals, the odd bit of support, and a dedicated player base willing to innovate, some decks can amass truly remarkable staying power. And of all the decks that refuse to die, there's one that's
Acá nos comentan que los mazos siguen ganando soporte y demás. Hay algunos que siempre se mantienen en el meta, por ejemplo Comandra, Security Control. Y hay otros que se rehusan a morir, como el Blue Hybrid, en el cual, si bien ya no recibe soporte directamente, con las cartas nuevas, con una buena estrategia y buena fundamentación y planeo de jugadas, puedes seguir llegando muy lejos con el mazo.
really captured my attention recently. It's a deck that went from near tier 0 villain of a format to heroic rogue underdog, defining an era of the game and defying Bandai's best efforts to kill it. It's time you and I talk about Blue Hybrids. At the release of BT4 Great Legend, the Digimon Tcg was still finding its footing, and as with most card games, the first few sets tend to be pretty straightforward in terms of design. Digimon kept things pretty straightforward in its first 3 sets, or 2 if you lived in the non-JP market. They introduced 4 basic card types, and they were all pretty clearly defined at the time. Digitama are starter cards which help you build up into Digimon in the raising area. Digimon are creatures which do battle, trying to break through the opponent's security in order to deal a finishing blow. Option cards are basically spells which provide you with a wide variety of effects as long as certain conditions are met. And Tamers are non-combatant permanents that provide value while in play. If there's one thing you need to understand in this history lesson, it's that Bandai designed Tamers to be non-interactable for the most part. They're just supposed to sit on the field and provide vital support, such as setting your memory to 3 at the start of your turn, or drawing cards when you meet certain requirements. As a result, they don't do battle, except for Marcus Damon, they don't digivolve, more on that in a moment, and there is a very small pool of cards that can even affect them, let alone destroy them. Well, BT4 introduced a series.
Acá se nos comenta que, bueno, Bandai sacó 4 tipos de cartas. Una de ellas los Tamers, los cuales hasta bt3 por lo menos no se podía interactuar con ellos. Es decir, que una vez que estaban en el campo, ganaba sus efectos y permanentemente ibas a estar generando beneficios y nada, ni el jugador de enfrente iba a poder hacer algo con tu Tamer, ni vos ibas a poder hacer algo extra con tu Tamer más que ganar lo que dice la carta. Hasta bt4.
Series of cards that fundamentally changed the way that players looked at Tamers. This set gave us the first hybrids. Hybrids are a special class of Digimon, some of which have the ability to digivolve from a tamer. The first set of proper hybrids, Agunimon, Lobomon, Burning Greymon, and Kendo Garurumon, were level 4 Digimon that all shared the ability to treat a tamer of the corresponding color as a level 3 Digimon. So now you could digivolve your Tai or Davis into a hybrid, get a draw, and then attack the opponent. This was a cool mechanic, giving red and blue players access to an additional swing whenever a tamer was in play. Although this did lead to some confusion as tamers were now technically affected by summoning sickness. Regardless, your tamers gained a new dimension, essentially acting as an additional attack in reserve that was very hard to play around. And this is where the notion of hybrid for game came from. But the first hybrids were pretty unremarkable otherwise. Lobomon and Agunimon were basically vanillas outside of the hybrid mechanic, and their effect-bearing counterparts, Burning Greymon and Kendo Garurumon, saw limited play since their abilities were mediocre at best and didn't warrant the 3 memory cost to evolve into them. Hybrids were also kept in check due to the considerable value of a single tamer at this time, and the low counts that they were played in. The guaranteed 3 memory at the start of every turn from a card like Tai Kamiya was too valuable to throw away on an early hybrid, especially when you might not see your second or third copy of that memory tamer, or find time to play another one in the course of the game. Both Red and Blue did receive full hybrid lines from Rookie 2 Mega, with Ancient Greymon and Ancient Garurumon acting as their respective boss monsters. But with the hefty memory costs required by both lines and the reliance on generic tamers, there just wasn't enough for hybrids to form a competitive core at this time. No, hybrids would have to wait until the 7th main set of the game to prove what they were really capable of.
Acá se nos cuenta que en bt4 salen los primeros híbridos, más que nada Agunimon y Lobomon, que son los que evolucionan por 2 arriba del Tamer, entre comillas ignorando el Summon Insignes. El Tamer igual necesita estar un turno, pero básicamente era tener un golpe más de la nada, el cual el rival no podía evitar a menos que dejara un blocker. Y aparte, bueno, recibieron toda una línea, la cual en ese momento, si bien era buena, no es lo suficientemente buena como luego en bt7 iba a llegar y empezar a romper colas. Por lo menos acá todo el mundo juega híbridos en bt7.
The release of BT7 Next Adventure fundamentally changed the way the game was played, kicking off what some consider to be the modern era of the Digimon Tcg. Speed, power, and mechanical complexity were all cranked up to previously unseen levels, and hybrids were the ones to usher in this new era. The new hybrids introduced in this set had literally evolved past their rather archaic forms from way back in BT4. In order to really sell them as the powerhouses of the set, Bandai added 3 mechanics to hybrid Digimon, all of which led to them being nothing short of broken at the time. First, tamers could now have inheritables, just like Digimon. The tamers of BT7 are mostly characters from Digimon Frontier, where the protagonists actually turned into Digimon themselves, so the idea to treat them as rookies with inheritable effects makes sense. Second, and arguably the most broken mechanic, is one shared by most of the level 5 hybrids. If you have a tamer in the Digivolution sources of a level 4 hybrid, then you can Digivolve into that level 5 for a cost of 1. When most decks at the time had to pay 3 memory to go into their ultimates, this provided unparalleled speed. And finally, the third mechanic which put hybrids above and beyond the rest of BT7's crowd is the ability for some of them to warp Digivolve. As if climbing up into a stack for cheaper than the competition wasn't enough, the tamers Takuya and Koji could allow you to warp into a level 6 for a cost of 4, as long as certain conditions were met. The cherry on the cake was the level 7 Omnimon stand-in for the hybrid meta archetype, Susanomon.
Hasta acá en bt7, a diferencia de bt4, los tamers no solo podían evolucionar como un level 3 debajo de un híbrido, sino que a su vez ganaban una hereditaria, ¿sí? El level 5, si era arriba de un híbrido, iba a costar solo 1, por lo cual tenías tu ultimate muy rápido y por poca memoria. Y a su vez en el rojo y azul podías por 4 de memoria, cumpliendo las condiciones, warpear al level 6 directamente. Por lo tanto los híbridos en ese sentido se volvieron muy estúpidos en ese momento. Muy fuertes y muy rápidos.
Any tamer can warp Digivolve into Susanomon for a hefty cost of 7, while also returning 10 hybrids and or tamers from your hand or trash to the bottom of your deck. Susanomon has a 15,000 DP body, and it deletes any Digimon when it Digivolves, and then can swing for 3 checks in one go. So, good card. With all those advantages, blue hybrids already had everything they needed to clobber traditional decks, but they also had advantages which put them way above what any of the other hybrid decks could do. Unlike most of the hybrid decks where the tamer was your only level 3, or at least dedicated level 3 in a sense, Blue hybrids actually had dedicated rookies in several different forms of Strabimon. Two were searchers, with one of them playing a tamer on deletion as an inheritable, and the third gained 1 memory on the swing if it was in a hybrid's evolution sources. Next, blue hybrids had flexibility, since it was the only archetype that had 2 distinct tamers, each with their own evolution line. The line centered on Koji, focused on bouncing Digimon and cycling its evolution sources, while the Tommy lineup excelled at stripping sources and stunning the opponent's Digimon. You could mix and match these 2 strategies and end up with a deck that had plenty of answers to the rest.
Acá vamos a empezar a hablar más que nada puntualmente del azul, ya que de eso trata el video. Hace referencia a que es de los pocos colores, básicamente es azul y rojo. Tuvieron, aparte de los level 4, level 5 y quizás algún level 6, a diferencia de los demás colores, tuvieron level 3 dedicados a la mecánica híbrida, ya sea porque buscan o porque al morir juegan un tamer. Y aparte el azul tenía 2 tamers distintos con distintas habilidades, efectos y líneas, por lo cual era muy versátil y daba mucho juego contra todos los matchups.
Rest of the meta. Blue hybrids were also blessed with access to some of the best generic support in the game. Option cards like Hammerspark and Icewall provided memory manipulation. Cocytus Breath continued to be the best non-deletion removal in the game at that time, and the non-hybrid tamer lineup was quite strong as well. Davis, arguably the best tamer in the game, provided memory fixing and searched for a blue Digimon on play, while Sora and Joe accelerated source stripping and netted you extra memory if the opponent left a sourceless Digimon in play. Blue also had some of the better floodgates at the time in Madoki Betamon and Sayakomon, which stopped memory gain.
Azul en su momento era objetivamente el color más fuerte, ya sea por las hammers, la icewall. En ese momento, bueno, la limitaron, pero igual estaba fuerte. Contaba con el mejor setter, ya que buscaba, así que podías agregarte lo que te faltaba, la evolución, un memory blocker o un Siakomon. Así que con Davis tenías el mejor level 3, el mejor tamer que se tenga 3 en ese momento. Sorry Joe, el único tamer que siempre decimos es muy fuerte, ya que el mismo tamer te deja llegar a su condición para ganar memoria, y a su vez el mazo con Kumamon y la Howling podías hacerlo muy fácil de sacar la source al rival y poder aprovechar ya sea el friseo del mazo o la memoria extra de Sorry Joe. Encima en ese momento no había antibody, así que todo se trasheaba. Y por el lado del Modoki, tu rival no puede ganar memoria, estúpidamente roto, sería para el mirror y para cualquier mazo que de alguna forma gana memoria. Y el Siakomon podía evitar que hagas el híbrido level 5 por 1 sobre el otro híbrido. Si habremos pasado turno con este bicho, jugando a este bicho. Gente lo comía. ¿Cómo? ¿Qué hace? No, tenés que pagarlo 3 memorias. Les pasaba el turno y comían pito unos cuantos. Siakomon, te bancamos fuerte.
Gain and Digivolution cost reduction, respectively. The latter card was actually key in slowing down rival hybrid decks, since it prevents the 1-cost evolution into their level 5s. All of that put blue hybrids way ahead of the pack, but it was one card that secured their dominance over the rest of the field. Tommy Himi. This little demon has 2 devastating effects. The first being to strip the bottom 3 sources of an opposing Digimon on play, which means you can also proc that effect if Tommy gets checked in security. Tommy's second effect is his inheritable, which allows you to freeze an opposing Digimon when you attack, as long as the target Digimon has no evolution sources. That freeze effect stops the Digimon from attacking or blocking until the end of the owner's next turn, and it persists even if you Digivolve on top of the sourceless Digimon. Tommy's freeze effect is easily accessible, because stripping 3 sources is enough to leave most stacks, well, sourceless. The conventional level 6 stack has 4 sources from level 2 to level 5, which means that Tommy would just leave you with your level 5 underneath. In order to deal with that lingering source, Tommy can evolve into the first of his 2 level 4 hybrids, Kumamon, which strips a source from the bottom of a Digimon stack when digivolving. And at that point, you just have to swing, leaving an enemy level 6 frozen in place, often for the rest of the game. Tommy doesn't even have to swing to freeze something, thanks to another trick that he has up his little sleeve. Tommy's other level 4 hybrid, Korikakumon, allows you to freeze a sourceless Digimon on Digivolution as long as either Tommy or another hybrid are in its sources. This means that you can drop Tommy from your hand, then immediately put Korikakumon over it to freeze a level 5 or lower in place. If you have access to a little extra memory, Kumamon can give you the source strip needed to freeze a level 6 in play without ever having to attack. And of course, when going on the offensive, Korikakumon combined with Tommy allows you to stun entire boards. You can freeze something on Digivolution, freeze another target on the swing, and if there's still another sourceless Digimon in play, you can freeze it by simply evolving another Korikakumon on top of your first, since the beast form hybrids can evolve onto a level 4 for 1 memory.
Acá nos comenta que el problema principal del mazo azul con respecto a los demás mazos era Tommy, ya que en ese momento su efecto de trashear 3, ya sea de la mano o de seguridad, alcanzaba para stunear un level 5 y luego, en caso de no alcanzar, subando un Kumamon arriba, le sacabas la última source. Por lo tanto, prácticamente cualquier Digimon que vos dejabas en campo, si te tiraban un Tommy, iba a quedar sin sources y probablemente stuneado ese mismo turno y para siempre. Con respecto al Tommy, su hereditaria es estúpidamente fuerte. Podías, ya sea jugando Kumamon y pegando, stunear un bicho, o directamente jugarlo de la mano y luego ponerle arriba un Korikaku y stunear un bicho sin pegar, o peor, hacer Korikaku, stunear, pegar y volver a stunear otro Digimon sin evoluciones. Básicamente tenías esa mecánica de congelar sin pegar, y a su vez el Korikaku podías evolucionarlo arriba del mismo por uno o arriba de otro híbrido por uno, nivel 4, y así congelar Digimon sin sources, por lo cual con muy poca memoria se podría decir que podías congelar toda una mesa sin mucho problema.
Tommy's dominance was so complete that blue hybrids almost entirely dispensed with the Koji line, save for the level 5 Beowulfmon, which had that cheap 1-cost evolution with a tamer in the sources, and had the effect to return a hybrid from its sources to your hand when attacking to bounce an opposing level 4 or lower Digimon to the opponent's hand. This gave you removal on turns when you couldn't freeze absolutely everything, and more importantly, it allowed you to recycle Kumamons and Korikakumons for further freezing. Outside of diehard fans like Lewis the Panda, you rarely ever saw Magna Garurumon, the level 6 boss monster of Koji's lineup in competitive play. It has a more versatile version of Beowulfmon's bounce ability, allowing you to return a hybrid from its sources when attacking or when digivolving to bounce an enemy Digimon of the same level. And once per turn, when an effect adds a card to your hand, you can restand one of your Digimon. This is a game ender in its own right and can facilitate even more recycling of Tommy's pieces, but it just wasn't needed most of the time. If you were running level 6, you might tech in 1 to 2 copies of BT6 Azulongmon.
Se nos comenta que el Beowulfmon era muy fuerte, ya que contaba con la evolución reducida, un buen ataque sumamente estúpido, ya que devolvía un level 4 o menor, devolviendo una source, y aparte ibas reciclando tus propios híbridos a la mano. Es decir, contás con 8 híbridos y aparte no es que si lo evolucionás lo perdés, ya que haces Beowulfmon y luego lo podés recuperar cada vez que ataques. Por lo tanto, si tenías 2 abajo, ya sea pusiste Kuma o Korikaku y arriba le metiste un Beowulf, pegás, vive, te traes un Korikaku a la mano, vuelve a pegar, te traes el Kumamon y así podés ir reciclando tus bichos, cosa de siempre tener híbrido en la mano, y aparte según la mesa vas a traerte uno u otro. Y por lo tanto ese bicho era tan fuerte que prácticamente los mazos no jugaban level 6, ya que era innecesario, costaba mucho, o jugabas 1 o 2 para finishar. Y acá nos va a mencionar seguro que antes que jugar Magna Garuru era mejor jugar a Zulong, ya que por el estado de la mesa, estado de juego, generalmente jugar a Zulong iba a ser más conveniente siempre que jugar Magna Garuru, ya sea por la memoria o por los checks que puede llegar a hacer.
since it applies a wide source strip on Digivolution, recovers memory, and gains multiple instances of security attack +1 for each sourceless Digimon your opponent has in play. But again, it really wasn't necessary and existed simply to make games a little quicker. Tommy's freezing powers allowed you to stunlock the opponent's Digimon forever, amass a large board of memory gaining tamers, and get plenty of level 4 hybrids in hand with some help from Beowulfmon. Once enough tamers and memory were available, you could rush the opponent's security, freezing any blockers in your way and not caring about security bombs, since your swings would be safe while still in tamer form. Altogether, blue hybrids just didn't allow the opponent to play the game. You were punished for swinging into security, since you'd often check tamers and supply them with bodies required to Digivolve up, and then they would just strip your sources and freeze your Digimon on the crackback. You just couldn't interact with the opponent's board, and outside of purple, decks didn't have ways to remove a frozen Digimon from the board, which allowed Sora and Joe to rack up tons of memory for the blue hybrid player. In fact, it was common to see blue hybrid players start their turn with 7 or more memory, and with access to Hammer Spark and Howling Memory Boost, they could extend their turn even further. Everyone else was stuck with 3 memory for the most part, and often couldn't make use of that memory thanks to Tommy freezing everything in sight. And don't forget, the floodgates that blue hybrid players could tech in would further restrict your options as well. It was a bad time, with blue hybrids reaching near
Básicamente, Blue Hybrid era todo un problema jugar en contra, ya sea los floodgates, los tamers o los híbridos. No podías jugar cosas adelante porque te las congelaban, le sacaban las sources o sacaban memoria. Si jugabas atrás todo el tiempo te van a ganar, te van a pegar antes de que vos pegues. Y si vos pegás mucho, podés darle tamers al rival, cosa de ayudarlo a ganarte. Así que era todo un tema complicado el meta de híbrido azul en su momento. Yo lo sufrí bastante, le ganaba a la mayoría, pero cuando te congelaban un Digi prácticamente tu rival arrancaba siempre con 5 o 7 de memoria. Algunos locos jugaban Susano, pero si no era, te hacían 4 híbridos en un turno, más el rookie, 5 golpes y ya está, no había nada que hacer. Pero era un meta más de pensar ciertas jugadas, más de jugar alrededor de. Estaba bueno, no era tan OTK, pero una vez que te arriesgabas por una jugada, como me pasaba a mí, a veces me tiraba all-in y me mataba una hammer en seguridad. Tenía idas y vueltas de los dos lados. Estaba bueno, estaba lindo y no estaba tan roto como parece.
Tier 0 status. You either played blue hybrids or you had a very rough time. A solid counter simply didn't exist, with yellow hybrids and purple hybrids being the only decks to afford minor levels of counterplay. Honestly, the most dangerous matchup for a blue hybrid player was another blue hybrid player. Bandai was also experimenting with side decks around this time, which allowed blue hybrids to better tailor their game plan and further counter whatever they came across. This resulted in some pretty novel strategies, including
paréntesis, side deck, 4 veces Hitmon. Cierro paréntesis.
The use of the purple Mimi Tachikawa to counter the use of memory manipulating option cards by other blue hybrids players. Everyone looked for ways to delete or stun tamers, trying Omnimon Sword Defeat, Lucimon Chaos Mode, and the mega level Argomon, but usually to little effect. There was just no way to prevent source stripping, so once these one-time answers hit the field, they would just end up frozen in place, feeding into the blue hybrid player's setup and gaining them all the memory that they could ask for. Many looked to the arrival of the next set, BT8 New Awakening, as a ray of hope, with the introduction of the DNA Digivolution mechanic and its ability to reset effects, including freezing, and the arrival of Black War Greymon, which gave access to potent tamer removal on a big body.
Bueno, se viene la parte de bt8, seguramente corte el video en 2 partes, esta será la primera. Si les gustó esta forma de reaccionar, comentar el video y demás, si quieren que lo haga sobre otros temas, ya sea de Digimon o de TCG en general, me pueden avisar y nada, los estaré mirando con mucho gusto y dando mi opinión, desde lo más genérico hasta mi opinión personal y particular. Y nada, Coméntenme si les parece o qué opinan también sobre el video que estamos viendo. Y nada, sigan viendo.
Y suscribite, idiota. Mirá, si no te suscribís, te pensás que uno es pelotudo. Yo lo estoy viendo desde acá. Suscribite, el like, el comentario. ¿Qué te cuesta, hermano? ¿Qué querés que haga? ¿Que vaya a amenazarte a tu casa con una pistola? Mirá cómo está Roberto. Mirá cómo está este tipo, es la imagen de un hombre acabado.
Ayuda al algoritmo, la concha de tu hermana.